Hi, I'm Steve Hall. Thanks for watching this 22nd video in the Veritas series. This is the third and final video contrasting Christianity with secular humanism. So if you haven't watched the first two, that would be Veritas videos number 20 and number 21, you should probably begin there. So how would biblical Christians and secular humanists differ when it comes to what might be called sexual deviancy? Well, biblical Christians believe that since God created sex to be a holy picture of the relationship between Christ and the church, and since a family consisting of a dad and a mom with kids has been proven over and over throughout history to be the ideal way to raise healthy people, Christians believe that only heterosexual sex between a man and a woman who are living in a marriage covenant with each other is acceptable to God. All other sexual behaviors are distortions of that picture and are sinful and are unhealthy. From the secular humanist perspective, since man is merely an animal, even if he is a highly evolved one, and since there's no God to determine an absolute right or wrong about these things, no sexual act should be considered improper. And hear those magic words again, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. But again, I think many secular humanists have their heads in the sand when it comes to trying to decide if a particular sexual behavior is hurting anyone or not. We have to think long range about these things. And at this point, Christians need to ask ourselves, have humanists gradually persuaded me that some sexual activities really are acceptable even though God says they're not? And this can lead us into a consideration of moral relativism, just in general. A biblical Christian believes that God has established some things as absolutely right and other things as absolutely wrong. And if God says that certain behavior is sin, it's wrong for us to convince ourselves that the behavior is really okay. Secular humanists, on the other hand, tend to believe that some things are right for some people in some situations that may be wrong for other people in other situations, and there really is no absolute right and there really is no absolute wrong. You may hear a secular humanist say something like, there are no absolutes. And by the way, Christians often chide secular humanists who say that by responding, are you absolutely sure of that? Is what you just said absolutely true? Because if there are no absolutes, then your statement must not be absolutely true either, right? And so there may well be absolutes after all. So to say there are no absolutes is really a self-defeating statement when you just give it a little thought. But to the secular humanist, everything depends on the situation. So I need to ask myself as a Christian, am I resisting the temptation for me to rationalize behavior that God says is sinful? Do I find myself assuming that because other sweet people are doing it, people whom I like, wonderful people, I admire them maybe they even call themselves Christians, am I convincing myself that if they do it, it must be okay? Tolerance is an explosive term in our culture, and it's largely because of the differing ways that biblical Christians and secular humanists define that term. Normally, for most people, the word tolerance has carried the meaning of allowing someone to have beliefs that you personally disagree with without trying to shut them up. But today, a lot of people are changing that definition so that tolerance to them means that you're willing to agree that someone else is right and what they're doing is okay. And that turns the normal definition right upside down on its head. Because in the recent past, almost everybody would agree that tolerance can only be exercised when you disagree with someone. Tolerance doesn't even come into the picture until you disagree. When we already agree that someone else is right, there's no need for tolerance. A biblical Christian believes that values, morals, and ethics are determined by God and revealed in His Word, the Bible, and are given to us for our benefit. So, to tell someone else that their behavior is right when God says it's wrong is really not being kind. To tell someone they're wrong may be one of the greatest blessings and kindest things you can do for them. If you know of someone who's thinking that it might be a good thing to start smoking, for example, or get drunk, or maybe to experiment with drugs, or maybe to have sex with someone they're not married to, or drive over the speed limit on a wet, curvy road, or be a racist, or refuse to follow the doctor's instructions in what could be a life-threatening situation, it would be wrong for you not to tell them the truth, wouldn't it? Christians certainly believe that we should be tolerant of other people. We should allow them the freedom to believe and worship as they see fit without trying to shut them up. But we believe that to excuse and overlook sin in our society in the name of tolerance is to do great harm to our society in general, but also to specific individual people in particular. A secular humanist, on the other hand, tends to believe that values, morals, and ethics are determined by each person for him or herself, probably in communication with a larger culture around him, but they believe ultimately to tell someone else that their behavior is wrong or sinful is often considered to be intolerant. And, from their perspective, intolerance, defined this new way, is not to be tolerated, defined the old way. So tolerance gets turned upside down. So as a Christian, do I know what the Bible teaches about the major issues of our day? Am I willing to take an unpopular stand because it's right? Am I tuned into the attitude that you will see all around you, that many people have today, that anything goes as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, and that if I disagree, I'll be labeled intolerant? Am I prepared to be stigmatized by other people as an intolerant guy, maybe as a bigoted guy, just because I have convictions about what's right and what's wrong? Well, let's consider one more topic, the topic of family. Christians see the traditional family unit, father, mother, children, as created by God to represent our relationship with Him. Christians believe that with some exceptions, that would be like in the case of abusive parents, but most of the time, parents do a better job at raising kids than government organizations. Christians believe that children are supposed to be responsible to their parents and submissive to their parents, unless, again, of course, the parents asking the child to commit some kind of sin. And I guess I should say it goes without saying, really, but Christians certainly recognize the importance of foster parents and step-parents in family units. Many secular humanists, on the other hand, prefer to think of family as larger groups of people who may not even be related biologically. Many secular humanists would affirm the legitimacy of so-called same-sex marriage. Many would deny the importance of children having both mothers and fathers, encouraging single parenting by choice. Sometimes it has to happen by necessity, but normally we wouldn't say by choice. Many secular humanists trust the schools more than they do the parents to know what's best for children. Some humanists believe that the child's first responsibility is not to the parent, but to a representative of the state. For example, many humanists often support the right of a child to have an abortion without the parents even knowing about it. And especially if you're a Christian young person, a good question might be, do I recognize my parents and guardians as my primary caregivers, my supporters, my authorities, or am I trying to appeal to others in an attempt to get around their legitimate God-given authority? Well, where do you stand? Are you a Christian? Are you a secular humanist? Are you maybe someone who calls yourself a Christian, but your thinking and your behavior betrays the fact that you're really more of a secular humanist? It's very important for us to think about these things and think them through carefully and make sure that our thinking and our behavior are really consistent with what we say we believe. My prayer for you is that you will be a consistent biblical Christian and that you will stay in the battle.